I did, in fact, receive a call a few days later. I wasn't sure if it was directly related to the Colonel's passive-aggressive pep talk, or just a coincidence. It came from a prospective client, an older lady looking for a stolen family heirloom, who hadn't said anything specifically about being referred to me by Colonel Dobbs, and I hadn't brought his name up. I was so relieved to have a new case, and I didn't want to mess things up with unnecessary questions. I hadn't had a drink since, so I was relatively sober as I went to work. Now I was in Mexico City, of all places, wearing a tie and freshly polished wingtips. I'd even shaved. Now if I could just find a pack of llamas. I couldn't believe they didn't sell llama cigarettes in Mexico City. Seemed ironic somehow. I assumed llamas in Mexico were like white cows in India. But I hadn't seen a single one, animal or cigarette, since I'd arrived. I'd spent hours scourging the city like a teenager on a scavenger hunt. But I'd come up empty. I glanced over at a nasty pack of cigarillos on the passenger seat and exhaled through a grimace. It was at rare times like this that I cursed my nicotine addiction. I cracked the window of my speeder, took a final excruciating hit from a Marlboro Rojo, and flicked the sizzling butt into the night. Below me, the red-hot cherry ejected and burnt out, leaving the charred filter to spiral softly into the world's largest ashtray. My speeder glided into the clammy, grimy darkness that lay like a rotten blanket over the metropolis. From a quarter-mile up, the sea of city lights twinkled like sequins on a hooker's dress. Just above the horizon, the blood-red moon was a bullet wound in the evening sky. Directly ahead, the Torre Latino Americana, once the Mexican capital's tallest building, stood 47 stories above a knuckled clump of runty buildings. Together, they resembled an impolite hand gesture. Back at you, pal. I descended through the 2 packs a day layer of atmospheric frosting and touched down one street south of the Dulce Vida apartment building. There wasn't a lot of luxury to be found in Mexico's capital, but the Dulce Vida had an aura that would pass for luxury in any civilized spot. This was the sort of residence inhabited by tasters of decay, rather than swallowers. People who liked the idea of living in Mexico City, but preferred to avoid the authentic experience. I slumped down in the driver's seat and peered up at the top floor of the Dulce Vida. The 2 windows on the far end, the ones in Eddie Ching's apartment, were nice and dark. A less careful Seamus would have made his move immediately. I, on the other hand, saved that kind of recklessness for marriage and liquor. The windows of the apartment next to Ching's were lined with Christmas lights and ablaze in holiday cheer. A silhouette figure walked past. I glanced at my watch. 8:29 p.m. It was Saturday night, and there were only 19 shopping days until Navidad. I figured the odds were fairly good that the neighbors would eventually go out for the evening, and I didn't want them overhearing anything illegal going on next door. I had plenty of time, and there was no reason to take unnecessary risks. I settled in to wait. Out of sheer habit and a pathetic dependence on nicotine, I pulled a Marlboro Rojo out of the pack and torched it. After a long drag, I removed the cigarillo from my mouth and inspected it closely. It certainly looked like a real cigarette, but it was an abomination, plain and simple. The kind of creation produced by Sauron and his minions in the foul bowels of Barad-dûr. I leaned back, my eyes locked on the windows of the Dulce Vida, my mind idling in neutral and listening to Christmas music float festively through the polluted night air. This wasn't the merriest way to spend the holidays, but it could have been worse. I could have been working as a mall Santa. That was a mistake I wouldn't make twice. A noisy, old-fashioned pickup truck roared past my speeder. I'd seen more four-wheel vehicles after 5 days in Mexico City than I'd seen in New San Francisco in a year. Being out of the States made me appreciate my lot in life. Personal airborne transportation was still a novelty to 90% of the world, and being among the other 10% made me smile, until I took another drag off my cigarillo. A few minutes later, a scraggly group of teenagers paused to check out my speeder. Realizing that the vehicle was occupied, the apprentice criminals meandered off in search of fun and profit. Like the juvenile delinquents in New San Francisco, these hooligans were continuing the tradition of embracing styles that the previous generation would find as distasteful and incomprehensible as possible. The latest form of fashion rebellion was to shave a narrow strip of hair from the forehead to the back of the neck. This was known as a racing stripe. The width, depth, and design of the racing stripe apparently indicated social affiliations the way baseball hats and tattoos had when I was growing up. I sat in my speeder for almost an hour, smoking compost sticks and staring up at the Dolce Vita. At last, the lights in the Yule-filled apartment went out. I climbed out of my speeder and pulled 4 large, festively wrapped, but mostly empty, Christmas gift boxes from the trunk. I closed the hatch and activated the alarm. Mexico City was notorious for its crime rate, even worse than Oakland. I crossed the street towards a covered parking lot that nestled up against the ground floor of the Dolce Vita. At the far end of the lot was a private entry for tenants. The majority of foot traffic went through the front door, which was around the corner on the other side. Having cased the location several times, I knew the back door had a lock that would open only with an access card given to tenants. Unfortunately, I didn't have one. I did, however, have a plan. Peering out from behind my tall stack of fake presents, I walked slowly into the parking lot. With any luck, someone would use the door in the next couple of minutes. If no one appeared, I would go to step 2B of Plan A, intentionally drop the boxes, then stall until someone showed up. Bright halogen headlights flashed across my back as a car pulled into the parking lot and drove past me. I slowed down as the driver parked and climbed out. It was a tiny but sturdy elderly woman, an ideal target. Laden with shopping bags, she trudged towards the private door. I maintained my leisurely place. The woman set a shopping bag on the asphalt and, after what seemed like an eternity of purse searching, came up with a card, which she ran through the card reader. After replacing the card meticulously, she grabbed the door handle with both hands and heaved. At that moment, she became aware of me and turned. I threw every ounce of charm I could muster into a wide smile. "Feliz Navidad!" The woman smiled back at me and eyed my huge pile of brightly decorated packages. "Feliz Navidad!" she answered. She stepped to the side and, as expected, held the door open. I was in. The senora followed me inside and down the short corridor to a set of elevator doors. An armed security guard sat on a chair nearby, reading a Condorito comic book. He barely glanced at me, probably assuming that I was helping the lady with the boxes. She reached past me and pushed the up button. We waited silently for the elevator. My nerves began to kick in, causing my stomach to slowly twist and tighten. Probably didn't help that I hadn't eaten anything substantial in 3 days. On the flight down, I had made the mistake of studying my Spanish for Idiots book, which had only reinforced my fear of native Mexican food by including translations for such phrases as "What species of meat is that?" and "No lettuce, for God's sake." As I waited for the elevator, I could feel my digestive juices deciding that my stomach was not only edible, but nutritious and delicious. After what seemed like a long time, the elevator chimed and the doors opened. Grandma and I stepped in, and I breathed a sigh of relief. As the door closed, she pushed the button for the 3rd floor, then swiveled her head in my direction. "¿Qué piso?" She seemed to be asking which floor I wanted. I time-traveled back to my 7th grade Spanish and began counting. 18. The old lady pressed the 18 button and offered me a crinkled smile. 10 seconds later, we came to a halt at the 3rd floor. Grandma stepped out of the elevator. "Buenos noches." "Buenos noches," I replied. The doors closed, and I began my ascent to the top floor.